Every culture has a value system. If we are to become culturally intelligent, it is critical that these values are known so that the adjustment process is not fraught with peril. For the most part, these values are matters of difference, not right or wrong. As such, we are free to communicate openness, acceptance, and trust to people who may express these values differently than we do. Deeply embedded in every culture is its understanding of power distance. Economies, politics, finance, social groups, and other religious organizations are all affected by the established norms of the distribution of power. The distance between those who wield power is determined by those in power and at the top, and is usually accepted and endorsed by those without power and at the other end of the continuum. Power distance refers to how far apart leaders and followers feel from each other. Countries scoring high in power distance, such as Mexico, India, and Ghana, offer a great deal of formal respect to leaders. Titles and status are revered. Leaders and followers are unlikely to socialize together, and subordinates are not expected to question their superiors. The US, on the other hand, is a low power distance culture. Missionaries through the years have become quite familiar with the differences in power distance from country to country. The plot thickens because power distance does not only apply to established distances between employer and employee. Because it is based on the acceptance of inequality, its ripples spread far and wide into areas such as gender, age, housing, food rationing, healthcare accessibility, education, and child labor practices. In light of these realities, the function of missionaries and cross-cultural workers become much more complicated. Any disrespect of power distance pits deeply entrenched chains of command against the assumption that there is simply one acceptable norm for power relationships. Cultural intelligence is truly tested when we ignore such an important recognition of distance protocols. For example, many Asian cultures such as Malaysia, China, the Philippines, in Latin America like Guatemala, Panama, Mexico, countries from the Eastern Bloc, nations like Slovakia, Russia, Romania tend to have a high power distance. Citizens of these cultures readily admit that a hierarchy exists and that power is distributed unequally. When these individuals sit in the same meeting with people from cultures with low power distance, there is usually a disconnect because there is not a similar understanding of equal status. In such an environment, those from low power distance cultures seem to be more vocal, and that is interpreted as being more willing to participate in the pursuits of the team. Those in the meeting from a high power distance culture may consider it inappropriate to eagerly participate without an explicit invitation from those in authority to do so. In multicultural situations, those from high power distance cultures are at a disadvantage because the acceptance of such a system hinders creativity and contributes to a lack of individualized initiative. Those from a low power distance culture often become impatient with the representatives from the former group because of the appearance of dependency on external systems to liberate and empower. We are all acquainted with stories from international students who admit that decisions cannot be made without consultation with parents thousands of miles away, or of members of a congregation who are consistently unwilling to speak up about some credible dissatisfaction or discomfort that might be obvious. High power distance culture individuals must be respected for the values they place on this structure. And those from low power distance culture should appreciate appreciate and be sensitive to the decision-making processes as well as the exercise of tolerance towards status consciousness. For cross-cultural agents, it must be understood that leadership styles are shaped by one's power distance preference. Low power distance groups are more participatory, and high power distance groups adopt a less participatory style that seeks permission to be creative.